An introvert? Are you an extrovert? Or do you land someplace in between the two extremes? And if you are one or the other, how do you know? How do you know whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or someplace in between? And perhaps more importantly, why does this matter? Because it does. And that's what I want to get into today. I want to talk with you about introversion, how to be clear about whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert. Why does this matter? And what are the implications, not just for you, but for your marketing? So tell me in the comments. That's the question of the day. Are you an introvert, an extrovert, or someplace in between? And the thing is you could take an assessment like the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, and it will tell you whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, or someplace in between, but it won't necessarily tell you how to know that, where it shows up in your life, and it won't tell you what to do with that information when it comes to living your life. For example, running your business, marketing your business. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So tell me in the comments, are you an introvert, an extrovert, or someplace in between? Because that's the question of the day. The reason I talk about this, I want to talk about this with you, and I will get into this very quickly, but the reason I want to talk about this with you is because I work with introverts and ambiverts, especially as it relates to their marketing. So I help introverts thrive in an extroverted marketing world. And if you're someplace in between, which is known as an ambivert, that might mean that you show up as an introvert in some places in your life and an extrovert in others. Good morning, Joyce. Thank you for being here. Joyce says that she believes she's an extrovert. I've talked to you, Joyce. I believe that might be true, but we're going to talk today specifically about how to tell, because there are specific models that we have that help identify and help classify or clarify what the difference is, or ways to think about it. And it relates to how you show up in your world. It relates to how you engage with your world. And then we're going to talk a bit about what this means for you, your business, and your marketing, or how you work, or how you engage in your world. And the thing is when you know if you're an introvert or an extrovert, especially if you're an introvert, it can really, when it comes to the work I do and what I know about, it can really have implications on how you market your business, how you run your business, how you schedule your time, how you set up your boundaries, whether or not you set yourself up to create some recovery time. If you know what I mean by recovery, you might be an introvert, because introverts often need recovery time. But I want to get into this right away, and talk about the specifics of being an introvert, being an extrovert, and how we can tell the difference, because there are three models. And the first one that I want to talk with you about is I refer to as the bucket model. And I usually use a mug, like my mug. It says to be you. There we go, so you can see. But I use a mug to explain the bucket model of introvert versus extrovert. And here's how it works. Joyce is here, so we'll talk about being an extrovert first. If you are an extrovert, you fill up your bucket or your mug, you fill it up with energy. You regain energy by spending time with people, by doing interactive things that energize you and lift you up, and they fill your bucket. And then when you're spending time alone, like when you're quarantining, it'll drain your bucket, because that's not as much your comfortable spot. And so you need to go interact with people in order to fill your bucket up again. That is extrovert. If you're an introvert, being with people can drain your energy and pull the energy out of that bucket. And being on your own, or maybe connecting only with one person that you really feel connected with, or getting that recovery time that I talked about, is what will fill your bucket. So introvert is filling your bucket with alone time, or journaling, or reading, walking out in nature, things that really fill your soul, where you're not interacting with other people. So interacting with other people drains your energy. So that's the difference. That's the bucket model. So the question on the table then is, when you're with other people, is it filling your bucket, or is it draining your bucket? And that can be a really big indicator of are you an introvert or an extrovert? I've been talking to a lot of introverts, including Joyce, actually, who might be an extrovert. Joyce, tell me, based on that model, are you an introvert or an extrovert? But I've been talking to a lot of people, and one about being an introvert and how it shows up in their business and things like that. And I had, there was a person who was using people as a verb. And it was awesome. I was out peopling, and I got too many. I could only do so much peopling before I need to go home and get away from the people. It was really funny, but it was a great way of depicting, being with people is for her, this person I was talking to, just a big drain on her energy. And so she needs to manage that. And those are the boundaries I was talking about, where sometimes you just need to manage your boundaries if you're an introvert, because you can only take so many people. They're drowning and draining your energy, and you need to refill your bucket by getting away from people. I have to be careful because I echo when I'm doing this model. So that's the bucket model. Another example of another model that I use when it comes to introversion and extroversion is what I call the focus model. And this is about being inward focused or being outward focused. Now, we both do both. We all do both. But if you picture this, you walk into a room with a ton of people. Maybe it's a live conference, or maybe it's a party or a gathering, right? I'm getting together with some friends in a couple weeks, and we're going to be all around the bonfire, So in that environment, when you enter the environment, where do you check in first? Do you check in externally? What are people doing and what's going on around you, and use that to feed your information? Or do you check in internally? How do you respond to this? Maybe you walk in and you're like, ooh, how does this feel to me? That might be, and I like this model less, but I think it's an important one because I do think a lot of people operate this way. Are you checking in within yourself to see how are things? How are things? How do I feel? Or what's going on here? How do I feel? Or what's going on with the people and the situation around me? And I from what I've learned, if you start by checking outwardly, that's more of an extrovert behavior. And if you start by checking inwardly, that can be an introvert behavior. And again, I think this one's a little bit less strong, but I think it can be useful. Just something to be aware of next time you're, next time you're in with a group of people, or you enter into a room where there are lots of people, notice where you check in first. Do you get the lay of the land and you know immediately where you want to be and you're using that information, or are you checking internally to how you respond? Can be an indicator of which part of yourself is showing up, the introverted side or the extroverted side. And I say that way intentionally, which part of yourself, because every single one of us has some sort of introvert and extrovert inside of us. It really just depends on which one we spend the most time in, and that can be very environment related. I hope that made some sense. I'm going to get into that in a second. Joyce says, I do identify as an extrovert, but I enjoy reading and walking in nature. And Joyce, you might. So I talk about it as, this is the third model, actually, and I want to talk about this. This is my favorite way of thinking about introvert versus extrovert, and I think it's powerful and useful. So let's get into it. So this is the third one, and this is what we think of. Think about introversion and extroversion as a spectrum. So you might sometimes be more introverted, and you might sometimes be more extroverted, and we can range between the two. In fact, there's a middle ground, and that middle ground is ambiversion. I'm an ambivert. I tend to gravitate more towards the introverted side these days. I was more of an extrovert when I was younger, but I've gotten more comfortable with myself as I've gotten older and have become more of an introvert side of the ambivert. And so Joyce says she identifies as an extrovert, but she enjoys reading and walking in nature. And Joyce, you might be an extrovert and lean a little towards the introversion sometimes, where you do spend more time in your head or, walking in nature and things like that. And maybe that's part of how you show up. Good morning, Heather. Heather identifies as an introvert, but I have to play a role of extrovert in many things that you do. Yeah, absolutely. And Heather, that was perfect, because this is what I actually want to get to. So thank you for that segue. We can think of introversion and extroversion as who we are, or we can think about them as how we operate. And I say that because it's both, right? There are ways biologically that we're built, and I'll be talking about this in a future episode about how we're biologically built to be an introvert or an extrovert. And it has to do with our chemical makeup and our nervous center and things like that. And if we spend our lives being in one zone or the other, being more of an introvert and operating as an introvert, we sharpen those skills. And so we are able to operate as an introvert because it's where we spent our time. We know how to be in something. It becomes more comfortable. It's a lot like riding a bike or cooking. Actually, I like this idea better, cooking a particular recipe. So I like to bake. And I have my set of recipes that are my go-tos, right? I make chocolate chip cookies, not off the package. I have a different recipe that I use, but I make chocolate chip cookies. It makes them flat and crispy around the edges and stuff like that. So I have that recipe. I do a toffee pudding that I really enjoy making. That's, it's no sugar. It's all dates and stuff like that. I have my go-to, right? I can make homemade Oreos. But then I'm looking around and I see other recipes that I could make and I feel uncomfortable because they're outside my skill set. But if I make them 3 and 4 times, they become part of this set that I'm more comfortable with. That's what I'm talking about. So, and Heather rolled into this really nicely where you play a role of extrovert. Your skills might be really comfortable in introvert because your chemical makeup is there and you've spent a lot of time there. But you've also spent time playing the role of extrovert. And so you've sharpened some of those skills as well. And so it might not be as easy, but you can get into that. So again, who we are and how we operate as introvert and extrovert both come into play. And I say it that way, and I think this is important because you can play a role as an extrovert. You have to be careful. It's going to drain you, right? Going back to that first model, it's going to drain your energy, and so you're going to need to recoup it and do something that's going to fill your bucket again. But it's not that you don't have the skill for it. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he was saying that he operates as an introvert. He really prefers one-on-one conversations, but he can also talk in public actually fairly comfortably. And then he said, the bigger the crowd, the better. It was kind of an extreme. He's either really comfortable as an introvert talking with people one-on-one, or he can talk to the large groups. And when he said that, and I didn't confirm this, but I was wondering if the larger the group, the more he can just think about them as one, right? And just talk to them as a whole. And it's less that there are many people in the room and more that there's just one big crowd that he can identify as one. So it made some sense, at least in my head, about what that meant. And so the question on the table, well, first of all, going back to the question, are you an introvert, an extrovert, or someplace in between, which would be an ambivert? But also, where is your comfort in terms of just how you operate in this world and where your skills are? Even as you're an introvert, do you have these extroverted skills that you can roll into, and what are they? When Heather has to play the role of the extrovert, in what way? What can she do? What do you turn on? And what do you need to do when you come back to being your introverted self again? How do you recap that energy? And so that as a whole is what I really wanted to talk to you about today, which is, are you over here? Trying to figure out where they are on the screen. Are you an introvert, an extrovert, or someplace in between? Now, I'm an ambivert, so I play, I can move around the range a whole lot. And I've learned to be more comfortable in the introverted, and I've found that extrovert can be a little more draining than it used to be, but it can also fill me up depending on who I'm spending my time with. Right? So it can be really situational. But let's roll into, I just want to touch on this a bit because I'm going to talk about it a lot more next week. What are the implications of your marketing? What does it mean if you're an introvert or an ambivert with that introverted side, especially as it comes to your marketing? What are the implications of that on how you market your business? And when I talk about who I work with and what I do, I talk about, and I say this very distinctly, I work with introverted business owners to help them thrive in an extroverted marketing world. Thrive. What does that mean to thrive in an extroverted marketing world? And the extroverted marketing world is the default strategies for marketing our businesses are extroverted in nature. Talk in public, talk to people we don't know, put ourselves out there, be open and vulnerable, and feel free to talk about ourselves and who we are and bring that in can be really uncomfortable for the introverted nature. But we want you to thrive. I don't want you to just survive. I don't want you to just get by. I don't want you to pretend you're an extrovert and hope it helps and cross your fingers. I want you to thrive. in your marketing. And by thrive, and let me bring these guys, I just saw that they were still there. By thrive, what I mean is to be able to sustain it and not hate it or not dread marketing, but maybe even find some of it fun and find your grounding and get really comfortable in it and be able to sustain your marketing in a way where your business thrives because you're able to show up authentically as yourself in a repeated way to build relationships. What's interesting is when I've been spending the last 2 weeks, I've been talking to introverted business owners to learn more about what they're struggling with and what their goals are, doing a lot of one-on-one conversation. And what's interesting is I literally lost my spot. I had something I wanted to say here. I've been talking with them about, they want their businesses to thrive. The introverts I'm talking to, they're not, here's the thing, they're not quiet extroverts, right? They are their own, being an introvert is not a quiet extrovert. It's a different thing, but they have their own goals. And the thing when I say they have their own goals, what I'm trying to say is introverts want business success, and it looks a little bit different than extroverts. And, what does a business thriving look like when you're an introverted business owner? And it's about connection. It's about relationships. Here's where I was going. Introverts want connection. That's what I've found. Tell me if this is true. If you're an introvert and you're watching this, whether you're here live or you're watching the replay, introverts are looking for connection with other people. Tell me if you agree with that with yourself, because that connection, it's not that introverts are quiet and extroverts. They want to talk, they want to engage, but in a completely different way. And that is part of how the marketing can look. This is Hunter. She likes to be here when I'm on the camera. When you are an introvert and you're marketing your business, that connection is what's going to make it work for you. That's where I was going. I totally found my way around the tree. Sorry about that. But I basically was talking about when you're an introvert and you're looking to make a connection with your audience, that's actually what the introvert goal is to feel connection. Not 100%. I don't think all the time. And I'm not saying extroverts don't want connection, but it really is one of the primary goals that I've found. One of the biggest problems with marketing our businesses is in putting our business out in the world and putting ourselves out in the world, it brings with it a vulnerability, a fear of being seen in a way that we don't have control over, or being seen in a way that we didn't mean, or saying something wrong and being judged for it. And so we judge ourselves ahead of time. There are all these things that get in our way that we need to take into account when we're marketing ourselves. And so that's why when I work with my members, when I work with my coaching clients, when I work with, I do run my courses, mindset is a piece of it. We need to get clear on how we're thinking about something so that we can show up authentically, so that we can take into account who we are as introverts, who we are as extroverts, if you will. Heather says she agrees. They want meaningful connection. And hey, how are you doing? Okay, design on brand. I want to say your name's Heather. Oh, remind me. It's become a dancing TikTok marketing world, and that's so not me. I constantly try to play the algorithm game while maintaining my authenticity. Yes, you are, Heather. Heather, thank you so much for saying that, because I think that that's exactly right? Constantly trying to play the algorithm game, which means making sure you're showing up in front of the right people while maintaining my authenticity. In my experience, playing the algorithm game is best played when we just try to talk to the humans that we're trying to reach. And the algorithms are set up that way, right? If we can do our best to just connect with the real people that are in our audience, the algorithm will work with us, because the things that we need to happen will happen, because it'll resonate, and they'll talk back to us like you are here. And so being real and authenticity, what does that mean? A lot of my audience is filled with writers or creatives. So they need to be authentically that person that they are. And when you do that and you make that connection, that's where you're going to find your success. Heather Heinig says, uncomfortable with surface social small talk. You want genuine relationships. 100%. Exactly. Okay, good. So we're all talking the same thing. Good. Thank you for that validation. That's great. And happy Thursday, Jason. And happy Cinco de Mayo. I didn't even think of that, but that's where we are today. So these are the challenges I want to talk about next week, because we're talking about, so if you're an introvert or an ambivert and you want that genuine connection, you want that authenticity, and you want to connect with people without having to pretend you're somebody else, what does that look like? How do you take who you are into account? That's what's going to matter, and that's what we need to figure out for you. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. How can you, especially if you're uncomfortable with surface relationships and small talk, and you don't want to go through the small talk, well, then how to market yourself. And I do digital. What's nice, I think, about digital marketing is there's a lot less of the small talk. You can go straight to it. You know, you can just post what you want to. You're not necessarily having that small talk conversation. That's one of the benefits of doing more digital marketing and less in-person marketing. So there's that. But I want to talk a little bit more about how can you talk to the people that you impact and want to impact, and not spend your time talking to people that don't need what you have to offer. So that when you are talking to people, you're talking to the people that matter to you the most, right? And I want to go back to that word thrive. This is about your business thriving. This is about you thriving. This is about you feeling strong and powerful in your marketing, in how you show up in the world, and feeling confident in it, which can be really, really hard to do when it feels like it's an extroverted marketing world. There is room in marketing. There is room in this world for introverts. And I think that we're already claiming it. We just don't realize it. And awareness is part of it, but also leaning into it and choosing to show up as we are and as who we are, and just feeling confident in being that person that you are is where it's key, and is the thing that's going to help you succeed, is going to drive the algorithm, is going to help you make those connections. So that is what we're talking about next week, is, so what does that look like in your marketing, and what are some questions that you need to consider as you figure that out? All right, my friends, I am here live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Thank you for talking with me. That is my favorite part, when we can have an exchange and interaction. That I'm all over that. If you are, let me put this out here, if you are an introvert and you're marketing your business, I invite you to grab the Tactical Guide to Digital Marketing. It's designed for introverts and ambiverts, honestly, an ambivert being right there in the middle, right? But having an introverted side is the place, these are, grab the guide. That's what I'm trying to say. These are the tactics that I've found with my work over the years with introverts that really, really help. And it'll give you a starting place for where to think about putting your marketing, or if you're already marketing yourself, it'll give you some validation and maybe some things to think about. So grab that. And otherwise, Heather said, good talk. Awesome. Thank you, Heather, for helping to make it a good talk. Heather and Jason and Joyce, really grateful to have you all here. Thank you again. And I will see you next week, 10 a.m. Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a fantastic week and a fantastic weekend. I'll talk to you soon.